Welcome, friends, to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery, New Jersey. I'd like to begin as usual with paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Patavi paragamanusa nate pasenti papakani samahita dhamma jivino tewa paramaesayo. So welcome again, everyone, to this Dhamma session on the topic of seeking the Heartwood. And I was reading the other day the Heartwood Suttas in Majjhima Nikaya, Majjhimas 29 and 30, very beautiful suttas with the simile of the great tree. So I'd like to speak about that and actually read a bit from the Mahasarupama Sutta, the greater of the two suttas on the Heartwood. And first I'd like to speak about the verse I just chanted, which is a verse from the Dhammapada, verse number 75. Good morning, friends. I can see your names in the chat. Just to greet you before I begin, Manal, Margaret, Gregory, Jayantha, Rebecca, Sean and Marilyn. Great to see that you're present, you're here for this live teaching. Thank you for joining. So this verse of the Dhammapada, verse number 75, it's a very beautiful verse. Patavi means the earth, or when you come to the earth from water, so a bank or a shore. Patavi, Paraga is the other side, the far shore, the crossing over, crossing from the sea to the shore or from a shore to another shore. Paraga, Patavi Paraga Manusa. Manusa is a person. So those people who cross over to the far shore. Nate Basenti Papakani. Not they do not speak. Basenti, they do not speak or talk or say. Papakani, evil things. They are those who refrain from unwholesome speech. Samahita means one who is stilled, one who is concentrated, one who's focused. Samahita, such a one. Dhamma jivino, one who lives the Dhamma life, lives a life in Dhamma, lives a life following the teachings of the Buddha. One could also say following the Dharma teachings. Such a person, a stilled person, a person who's living a Dharma life. This is the person, the kind of person who crosses over to the far shore, one who refrains from evil. Te we parama isayo, the last line, they indeed are the supreme, the ultimate wise ones, seers. So this beautiful verse, I'm going to give you a translation that I found which I really like and read it to you. So this is the Dhammapada verse 75 in English. Few are those who reach the far shore. The rest merely run back and forth on the near bank. But those who live rightly, practicing the Dharma with mindfulness, they will cross over, calm and collected, and go beyond the realm of death. So I feel that translation really does justice to this beautiful verse. So few are those friends who cross over to the far shore. Many are those who seek uh, happiness, who seek fulfillment, who seek spiritually, who are on the spiritual quest. We are many, but few are those who attain the final goal of that quest. And so it really behooves us, I feel, to explore um, what is the path, and what are the ways in which we diverge from the path. What are the ways in which we don't quite meet, we don't quite follow, we don't follow through to the end. And I do think, it's fair to say that this is probably most of us. We can settle for less. And this is not to be disrespectful of that or to disparage that, because, we're all seeking the same thing. We're all seeking happiness and well-being and peace, but it's easy to settle for um, lesser, uh, a less full or a less complete um, journey to come to that place of perfect peace. And of course, the Buddha was aware of this, and he himself, as we know from his life, he had so many twists and turns on his spiritual path, even as the Bodhisattva, even as the one to be the Buddha. In that very lifetime, he spent many years, as we know, pursuing practices that were not really beneficial. Actually, you could even say kind of wasting his time. As he said, at the end of, say, his period of 6 years of austerities, he came to the realization that this wasn't getting him anywhere, to be torturing the body in all these various ways, through starvation, through even starving himself of breath, through not taking care of the body. To come to that realization, this has been a complete waste of time. I've been barking up the wrong tree. I've been following the wrong course. Takes enormous humility, of course, and willingness to change, willingness to, in a way, recognize the futility of so much of what we have done, and to come back on course. Really takes a lot of humility and care and kindness, but this is something we want to find ourselves doing repeatedly, resetting the compass, because we can't know until we know. And through our practice, isn't it the case that we will follow some particular course of practice or some particular way of living or some particular teaching, and then we may come to a point where we realize this is not quite it. It's good, but it's not quite serving the purpose. And to have this experience again and again is something one would expect on the spiritual path, as we refine our wisdom, as our understanding grows. So for most people, as for the Buddha, the path can be something of a kind of a zigzag. It can even be, a few U-turns here and there. A meandering path, not necessarily a straight line. Very rare for somebody to jump, as it were, from complete ignorance to full understanding. No, we're finding our way in the dark, in the mist, in the fog, in the gloom, and we gradually, it becomes a little bit more light, a little bit more illuminated, and then we see a little bit more clearly which way we need to go. And this involves constant readjustment. And so, just as in the life of the Buddha, his last life, his life as the Bodhisattva, um, many twists and turns, many changes of direction took place. So too for us. We don't need to be afraid to review our practice and our progress, to assess it, to gauge how it's going. What are the results? Am I feeling calmer? Am I feeling less agitated? Am I a kinder person? Am I less likely to get angry? I get upset? Am I feeling more well in myself? Or are these practices actually leading to more discontent, more agitation, or maybe judgment of others? Maybe putting myself on a pedestal here. Maybe I'm separating myself off from the rest and developing a sense of superiority or inferiority. And so to keep assessing, how are we doing? Is there a good result? Is there a gradual increase in well-being happening here? And so this sutta I'm going to speak about, Mahasarupama Sutta, the greater teaching on the simile of the Heartwood, Majjhima 29. I'm going to read you some of this sutta, and we're going to explore the simile of the great tree. It's a mirror, this sutta. We can use it as a mirror to gauge our progress, and also as a compass to show us how to move forward in the best possible way for liberation, friends. So relax, settle, and maybe close the eyes and meditate while I read to you from this sutta, Greater Discourse on the Simile of the Heartwood. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha on the mountain Vulture Peak. It was soon after Devadatta had left. Just to say, Devadatta, as many of you will know, was the Buddha's cousin who became a monk, and he became very kind of conceited, perhaps as the cousin of the Buddha, or in some way due to his practice. He developed a sense of that he was maybe an equal to the Buddha, or even possibly in some way superior to the Buddha, and he tried to, as it were, take over the leadership of the Sangha. And so Devadatta had made his attempt to usurp the Buddha, and he'd left unsuccessfully. There, referring to Devadatta, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus thus: Here some person goes forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness, considering, I am a victim of birth, aging, and death, of sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. I am a victim of suffering, a prey to suffering. Surely an ending of this whole mass of suffering can be known. When this person has gone forth, they acquire gain, honor, and renown. They're pleased with that gain, honor, and renown, and their intention is fulfilled. On account of this, they laud themselves and disparage others. Thus, I am one who gets gain and renown, but these others are unknown, of no account, these fellow spiritual practitioners. They're of no account. One becomes intoxicated with the gain, honor, and renown. One grows negligent, falls into negligence, and being negligent, lives in suffering. And the Buddha said, suppose it's just as if a person is seeking heartwood, wandering around in search of heartwood, and they come to a great tree standing possessed of heartwood. Passing over the heartwood and the sapwood, the bark, inner and outer, such a person would cut off the twigs and leaves and take them away, thinking they were heartwood. Whatever it was they had to use the heartwood for, their purpose would not be served. So such a person who is satisfied with gain, honor, and renown, is like a person who's taken the twigs and leaves of the tree and stopped short with that. And the Buddha goes on to say, some people follow the spiritual life and they gain honor and renown. And because of that, they don't laud themselves or disparage others. They don't become intoxicated with that. They don't grow negligent and fall into negligence. They are diligent and achieve the attainment of virtue. They're pleased with that attainment and their intention is fulfilled. On account of their virtue, they laud themselves and disparage others. I'm virtuous. I'm of good character. These others are immoral, of evil character. One becomes intoxicated with that attainment of virtue and grows negligent. And living negligently, one lives in suffering. This is just like a person who cuts off the outer bark of a tree and takes it away, thinking it's heartwood. Others attain virtue, attain honor and renown, but those things do not intoxicate the mind, and they are able to attain stillness, samadhi. They're pleased with the peace of that attainment, and their intention is fulfilled on account of their ability to practice samadhi, to experience a unified mind. They laud themselves and disparage others. Those others have minds that are astray, unconcentrated. One becomes intoxicated with the attainment of concentration, grows negligent, and lives in suffering as a result. This is like someone coming to the great tree looking for heartwood and passing over the heartwood and the sapwood. They cut off the inner bark and take it away, thinking that it's heartwood. Others, possessed with samadhi, the ability to meditate, to experience great peace, great stillness in meditation, who have virtue, who are renowned, who are respected and revered, are able to achieve knowledge and vision, jnana dasana. They're very pleased with that knowledge and vision, and thus their intentions fulfilled. On account of it, they may disparage others. I understand. I live knowing and seeing. These others have no idea. They're ignorant. And in this way, intoxicated with knowledge and vision, lauding oneself and disparaging others, one falls into negligence. And being negligent, suffering is apparent to such a one. Such a person is like one seeking heartwood, coming to a great tree, passing over the heartwood, cuts off the sapwood and takes it away, thinking it's heartwood. And then finally the Buddha said, there are those spiritual seekers, practitioners, who are renowned for their practice, their life, their way of being in Dhamma. They have virtue, they are able to meditate well, experience great peace, they have great understanding of the spiritual path, possibly even some spiritual attainments such as powers, the ability to see things that other people may not see, to hear things that other people may not hear. And on account of all of these abilities and this goodness of their lives, they don't laud themselves or disparage others. They're not contented with that. They can't rest with that. But they continue to diligently practice for liberation. Such a person, not intoxicated with progress on the path, doesn't grow negligent or fall into negligence. Being diligent, they can attain perpetual liberation. It is not possible for such a person then to fall away from that perpetual deliverance, that nibbana, that purification that has happened, the freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion. In this case, it's like a person seeking heartwood, going up to a great tree and stripping away the leaves, the twigs, the branches, the outer bark, the inner bark, stripping away the sapwood and coming to the heartwood and knowing it for what it is. They have attained, they have reached the goal, and they will be satisfied with that. So the Buddha concludes this teaching saying, this holy life, that is, friends, this practice life, this life of Dhamma, this life of fulfilling the Buddha's gift to us, putting into practice the Buddha's teachings, this life does not have gain, honor, or renown for its benefit, or the attainment of virtue for its benefit, or the attainment of stillness, peace, for its benefit, or knowledge and vision, understanding of the teachings, understanding of spiritual path, attainment of spiritual practices for its benefit. No, it is this unshakable deliverance of mind that is the goal of this holy life, its heartwood and its end. Ewam. So what a beautiful sutta, and it really is a good one for reflection, friends. Let it be a mirror for us all, because we can investigate in our own lives, our own really sincere and devoted quest for liberation, where we're at, and see where we may sort of rest back, see where we may give ourselves a pat on the back. We may laud ourselves and even disparage others. And in fact, part of the pride that can come in our spiritual practice manifests very often in a gaze towards others that is a little bit disparaging, where we find fault with the others or another. And it's really good to see that, just to observe the mind and to see if we're critical in any way of our teachers or our brothers and sisters on the path, our peers, those who are elders for us, those who are younger than us. If we find ourselves judging, finding fault with, this is not to say that there may not be some truth in our thoughts around observing the happenings around us. But what I mean is, when we're observing critical ways of thinking towards others, it's a sign, it's a signal for us. It's a red light flashing for us. What's happening? What am I holding on to here? What am I making much of here? Am I coming from some kind of a vantage point? Is there a sense of having a place, having an attainment, having a position, having got somewhere on the spiritual path? Because we're liable to have this happen. We're liable to feel that we have attained something at times. If we experience jhana, we enter into jhana, we experience great peace, great bliss, and great letting go and great insight as a result. It can be easy to identify with that experience, to hold to it, to feel good about it, and to we sort of can go up in our own estimation. We can go up in our own estimation as a result of virtuous acts. We do something good, something wholesome, and we can laud ourselves for that. We can feel a sense of satisfaction. This is not to say that it's not good to experience the joy of giving and goodness and the refraining from harm that we notice in ourselves, we can really celebrate those things. But there's a subtle possibility of identifying with that goodness and identifying with that sense of well-being, cleaving to it, holding to it, taking it personally. That is the danger there. So to be able to not stick to any of these attainments, don't personalize or own goodness or the sense of self-respect and self-esteem that can come about through following this path of practice, or the peace that we may experience through our practice, the equanimity that develops, the letting go of reactivity. We can observe that in ourselves and enjoy that and feel good about that, but notice when that may veer into a kind of subtle or even overt looking down on others, disparaging others, finding fault with others when they are flailing around, reactive, upset, getting worked up about things that we may feel, you should be beyond that. I'm beyond that. So to be taking great care, and I feel that a lot of what this sutta is pointing to is the sense of self. It's the selfing around our practice. It's the ownership of our practice. It's the feeling of all the very powerful sankhara, the tendency that we have to make this experience me and mine, to be the meditator, to be the practitioner. A lot of the path for us then, when we look at this sutta, is the stripping away of that identification. So it's just like seeking the heartwood of the great tree. It's required, it's necessary to strip away the layers that overlie that heartwood, that hide that heartwood from us, from our view, that obscure the heartwood, that cover over it, to peel away and strip away all of those layers, work our way through the foliage, get to the bark and peel away, cut away until we come to that place right in the center. And it gives also the sense of a gradual process, does it not? It is a work, it is a labor to make that journey, like crossing over to the far shore. It's a workout. It has its dangers, it's hard work, it requires effort and focus, not to be distracted along the way. And so we can ask ourselves, how do I feel regarding my standing in the world? Do I make much of that? Do I get my happiness through my position in society, gain honor and renown? Do I identify with my wealth and possessions, with my career, with my attainments intellectually, academically, with all the good things that I've done? Do I identify with that? Do I identify with my family, my clan? Do I identify with my social strata that I find myself in? Do I even identify with my nation, with my religious, cultural background? We can see whether there's anything here for us, any leaves and twigs that we can recognize. And through noticing our acculturation, we all come from somewhere, we all have particular backgrounds, and we will manifest those backgrounds. I know very well myself from living in communities international communities often, you know, how people manifest their nationhood. I'm so British, I'm so Irish. It's, you know, really quite a sobering thing to realize how much one manifests the place that we come from. And that's true of others, you know, there are national characteristics and traits. So to see these things and through seeing them, we can let go, you know, we can disidentify. It doesn't mean we stop having a particular way of manifesting, but we don't have to make much of that. That is simply due to cause and effect. And we don't have to identify with our culture, our background, the views, the opinions, the stances of those around us. This all relates to the leaves and twigs, the gain honour and renown in this sutta, and not to be caught up in these things. And then virtue, friends, you know, we keep the precepts. We do our best to keep the 5 precepts, all of us. And some of us keep more precepts, and really continually we want to be trying to refine and purify and perfect in a way. It's like a quest for goodness. It's part of the spiritual path for sure. Without goodness and without that intention towards harmlessness and really being a friend to all and being safe for all, to not being ever a cause of fear in others. You know, this quest for goodness is crucial for our ability to practice on the path. But it can be interesting to see how we might start to, or need to come out of an identification with that goodness, an ownership of that goodness. Actually, the more we practice, we realize goodness is natural. It's a natural way of being. It's normal. To be hurting and harming others or ourselves is aberrant, pathological behavior. It stems from a mind that is disturbed, maybe traumatized, maybe confused, a mind that is steeped in ignorance. It's normal to be good. We should be able to take it for granted. And so to let go of any sense of identification with the good is surely part of this path for us. And this is like the outer bark of the tree. To yes, it's required, it's necessary for the health of the tree, but it is not the heartwood. And so to practice acts of generosity, to be harmless, to be striving in our lives, in all the ways in which we interact with others and all the things that we find ourselves doing, the responsibilities that we may have, to always be working to do the very best we can to maintain and uphold the precepts, and to really open to the possibilities for manifesting in the world in a way that's helpful, supportive, uplifting, bringing goodness, bringing loving kindness, bringing care into the world. To do this as a part of the path, but as something that is seen as inevitable and natural, and like almost like a byproduct of the path. You know, it's a way to manifest in the world. But then we have our practice of purifying the heart. It's like the Buddha's teaching in the Dhammapada verse, to do no harm, refrain from harm, to do good, and to purify the heart. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. So it's not just the harmlessness and the virtue, but then the purification of the heart that we have to really give our energy and attention to. So manifesting virtue, maintaining virtue and purifying, refining virtue is very much part of the path, but it is merely the outer bark of the tree. So to recognize, friends, where we may identify with or get caught up in doing good, and just to see that is we're falling short if we rest on that virtue, if we make much of that virtue, if we identify with that virtue. That virtue is to be let go of. And then, our meditation practice, the degree of peace and stillness, of tranquility, of insight that we may experience through our meditation practice and our life of practice, we would be selling ourselves short if we hold to that, if we let that be the end of the path for us. And honestly, I think a lot of us are prone to holding to peace as a beautiful endpoint here. It is not that. Peace is a byproduct of the practice, and it's not something to be clung to, as we know, But it's difficult sometimes not to want to rest in peace. So we can be aware of that and just notice in the practice where we may incline towards resting, having a kind of holiday, having a nice, peaceful, relaxed time, and forgetting really to investigate here, to investigate for any hindrances, to investigate for the defilements, to look and root out, seek out, any sources of disquiet in the heart and mind. And this is work, this is a search, this is like an investigation, and it requires effort and direction. And so let's consider, do I like to meditate so that I can feel peaceful and just rest in that peacefulness? And do I make much of that? And do I feel that people who don't experience peace and tranquility and maybe jhana, maybe great states of one-pointedness of mind, maybe they're just really not practicing very well? So we can assess, is there any attachment to peace along the way? Because peace is not the end point of the path of practice. We are often quite easily distracted and deluded by peaceful states. We can feel we've reached the end goal when there's still a whole load of defilements in the heart and mind. We can bypass, those defilements. We can put them aside. We can ignore. The way to help us to avoid this is to give ourselves challenges. It's like for myself, before I became a monastic, I lived alone for a while. And I hadn't lived alone until I was like in my early 30s. And when I found myself living alone, it was so delicious. It was so delightful. I was so happy, and I felt very peaceful, and I was meditating, I was practicing, and I felt, anger is no longer an issue for me. There are no negative thoughts, feelings. Everything's easeful, beautiful. Life is so good. And I was resting in that very peaceful space for a long time, going on retreats, doing the minimum of other things, just going from retreat to retreat and loving to meditate. And it was when I had the good fortune to consider and be supported and kind of encouraged to go forth that I realized, when the challenge of community came, living with other people, having to do things I didn't necessarily want to do, not being able to meditate that much, when I thought that was the only thing that we were supposed to be doing. All the vicissitudes of life began to reveal themselves, and I could recognize where the defilements were and how much work was yet to be done, you know. So if we feel, friends, that we're resting in peace, dwelling in a beautiful way, all is well, no problem, it's really good to test and challenge ourselves and to put ourselves in places and situations where there is some form of letting go required, letting go of our autonomy, letting go of our sense of comfort, letting go of our wishes and desires. Only then often can we appreciate those wishes and desires are there. That need for comfort is there. That attachment to peace is there. So to continually challenge ourselves, if we're finding our practice smooth and easy, don't fall for, don't settle for that. Find ways to unearth any defilements that may be lurking in the heart and mind. And so I think at this point I just want to bring in another sutta because it relates to this inquiry. There's a beautiful sutta, many of you will know, Majjhima 151. It's called The Purification of Alms Food. And there's a conversation in this sutta between the Buddha and Sariputta. Sariputta looking very peaceful. And the Buddha says, how is your practice going? Sariputta says that he dwells in perpetual peace because he's an arahant. That is the truth. And they have a conversation then about the investigation that's required for all of us to see where we're at on the path of practice. In this regard, as they're both monks, they'd speak about the alms round, going on the alms round as a time when there is a risk of sense desires arising because of all the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the thoughts that may arise as we go into the town, into the village. Friends, we can take this as meaningful for all of us when we're resting in our peaceful, solitary, perhaps, spaces, maybe living alone, maybe doing what we want, maybe having the lifestyle that we're comfortable with. All well and good. But whenever we have to step out of the comfort zone and face some challenges, this is the time when we get to really investigate this heart and mind and see where we're at on the path. And so in this sutta, Sariputta describes the way for us to investigate and see how we're doing. So I think I like to morph into this sutta. And having said that, of course, in the simile of the Heartwood, the person who's not falling for peace, who's not settling for anything, any experience, any sense of attainment or place on the path of practice or person practicing, any of those concepts and all the ramifications and proliferations around them, one who's not falling for any of those, who's not immersed in those, is able to continue to practice. The compass is pointing to Nibbana. We just keep walking, stepping one step at a time in that direction, and surely that perpetual attainment will eventually come to be. So coming to Sutta 151, purification of alms food. These are the checks, these are the questions we can ask ourselves. So Sariputta said, so when I go for alms, along the path, in the place where I'm wandering for alms, we could say, in my life, in all the events that take place, day by day, or throughout my day, I ask myself, was there any desire or greed or hate or delusion or repulsion in my heart for anything that I saw that I'm seeing, that I've seen in this day along the way. In the same way, has anything I've heard brought up for me any liking, disliking, any desire, greed or aversion, delusion or repulsion in the heart? Anything I've smelled, anything I've tasted, any thoughts that have come? Has there been any desire or greed manifesting in the mind? So to continually question ourselves is to seek out the defilements, to bring them in, to bring them up, to bring them into the forefront and to investigate them. We want to be searching, seeking, not for peace, not for virtue, not for honor. We want to be seeking for the defilements in the heart and mind, looking for them. Our search should be for that. And on checking, if we know, if we realize, yes, there's been such and such desire or greed in the heart, there's been some hatred, some anger, some aversion, delusion, repulsion have come up. If this is the case, if we spot something, then we should make an effort, give up those unskillful qualities, and we continue then to be vigilant, keep seeking, waiting. It's a bit like waiting for the next defilement, the next source of suffering to arise. We want to be very watchful, like the watcher at the gate, to see what comes and goes and be looking out all the time for anything unwholesome there. If one has no desire, aversion, delusion, no source of suffering arising in the mind, then one can meditate with rapture and joy, training day and night in skillful qualities. We can question further, have I given up the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation? Have I given up seeking more pleasant sounds, sights, smells, tastes, touches? Am I reveling in thoughts, living in a kind of heavenly realm of constructs? Is there anything that we're pursuing here? And we can ask ourselves this and be willing to investigate. And through investigating that inclination for more of anything, any experience, then we can let go of that inclination. And we can ask ourselves, have I given up the 5 hindrances? Do I still find some subtle or overt enjoyment in sleepiness, drowsiness, laziness, restlessness, distraction, agitation, in desire or aversion? Do I delight in any of these things? Do I spend my time in doubt, questioning to the point where my practice is suffering? We can investigate this, see if we can find any hindrances in the heart and mind, look out for them, give all our attention to this investigation. And in the same way, Sariputta goes on to say, the questioning continues. Have I developed the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 satipatthanas? Am I practicing well in that way? If not, put in more effort. If so, rest in joyful appreciation of that. Have I developed the 4 right efforts, all the Bodhipakya Dhammas, the 4 right efforts, the 4 spiritual powers, spiritual strengths, the awakening factors, the Eightfold Path factors? There's no time right now to go into all of those, friends, but we can investigate all the teachings of the Buddha in this way. Am I following the Eightfold Path well? Is there any place that I'm not really considering, is there anywhere I'm falling short? And in this way, all of this questioning and investigating, how are we doing? We can use the Buddha's teachings as our yardsticks, as our mirrors to show us how we're doing. And I think the purpose, the point of this sutta at this juncture for me is that all our energy and attention is to be directed here to root out the defilements. And whenever we find our attention going out to others, to situations, and we find ourselves coming up with views and opinions, judgments, ideas about those things, we have stepped away from the path. We're resting somewhere. We've somehow lost the heartwood and we're coming out and getting lost in the foliage. We're somewhere in the bark, in the outer layers. And just to be very conscious of that and bring the attention back to the search for the defilements, the search for that which is not nibbana, the search for that which is not complete. And we'll know for sure when we reach the end of the path. Until we do, friends, in short, we want to not be satisfied with this. Let there be a quest here. Let there be a search. Let's keep searching for the heartwood. And in that way, we will continue to hone our practice, refine our practice, and we'll keep moving in the right direction, the direction of liberation. Ayya. So thank you for your wise attention, friends. I'm going to have a look at the chat. I greeted a few of you at the beginning. I want to say hello to others who have dropped a line in the chat. And just see if there's any questions or reflections to share. Let this now be a conversation. Hi, Madeline, Christopher, Charles Lee, Bhumika, John, Mandy, Sriti, someone whose name is in, I think, Sinhala or Burmese. Welcome. Amranatha and Sud. Welcome, all of you, and thank you for listening. And Okay, I've got a couple of comments from Christopher I'm going to share. And then just one other question. Good, okay. So Christopher says, Chula Viyuha Sutta, Sutta Nipata 412, if truth is one and no second exists, debates will never arise among folk. A variety of truths they themselves do form. Gurus, therefore, never speak of one truth. Never was there a variety of truths, other than sensations always in the world, creating views, using speculative logic. They speak of a duality, truth and lie. And there's a bit more here. In that perspective, Four Noble Truths are not actually truth, but solution to a problem, which is the problem of existence. What are your comments? Thank you very much, Christopher. And then he says, existence equals birth, aging, sickness, and death. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, what is truth? It always brings to mind for me Christ Jesus, being asked the very same thing and declaring what is truth. Truth is elusive. Truth is beyond anything I can say. It is to be experienced, each one for ourselves. And I agree with you. I feel that when we speak about truth, using concepts, using words. That's always going to be falling short of the truth. So we don't need to say too much, perhaps. At the end of the day, it's good to listen to Dharma teachings. It's good to consider the words of the Buddha and spiritual teachers and guides. But then to really come to an understanding, to approach the truth, one needs to step away from all of that, to rather put all of that into practice. It's like the ocean, the waves at the top of the ocean have their place, and then one needs to dive deep into that ocean to immerse oneself. And this is beyond conceptualization, beyond thinking. It's beyond consciousness as we know and appreciate it. So the Four Noble Truths, indeed, I can see what you're saying when you say they're not truths as such. They're more like pointing to the way of practice. That's very beautiful, and I'm going to contemplate that. When the Buddha says, in the First Noble Truth, there is suffering, this is something one could say it's true, but it isn't just to take it as an idea and a concept. Tick, that's true. Yep, got it. Not at all. That's not going to get us anywhere at all. It's to contemplate, to really consider deeply, is that true or not? And it reminds me a bit of Sri Ramana Maharshi, his teachings, not this, not that, to approach these teachings with a spirit of inquiry, a mind that is skeptical, to really investigate these teachings. We want to test them out. So the Four Noble Truths cannot be true for us just because we could say intellectually they make sense. Yes, I get that. Those words ring true. Rather, the Four Noble Truths are to be applied to our every thought, every word, every deed, every moment of our lives, and to investigate those concepts and to find the truth within them, to put the gold in the crucible and to refine that gold through the heat of our inquiry, our investigation, our effort. And actually, it's very helpful to not take those truths as truths. To question those truths is to open up, to the fullness of these teachings. The Buddha encouraged us to be skeptical. He encouraged us to question. He encouraged us not to believe anything we're told. No, what we want to do is find something that meets us, that rings true, that has the resonance of Dhamma, and then investigate it and to seek the truth within. And it's an ongoing journey. It is to seek the Heartwood and to keep stripping away all that is not that. Thank you very much, Christopher. I want to recommend everyone then to have a look at Chula Wiyuha Sutta, Sutta Nipata 412. Please investigate. On that note, I want to mention King Pasenadi. Last week we were talking about, is he a stream enterer? Was he a stream enterer? Maybe at the end of his life? I don't think he was. At least I don't think there's any evidence of that from the Pali Canon. That was the homework. Rebecca makes a comment here I'd like to share. Thanks, Rebecca. Says, it helps me to think about dependent origination to help dispel feelings of superiority. Beautiful. Yeah. Dependent origination is something to reflect upon again and again. It's another one of those truths, isn't it, Christopher? It's a truth that is to be immersed into, this way of seeing reality, cause and effect, the impersonal nature, the interconnectedness of all things, there's so much there for us to help us to extricate ourselves from delusion, from ignorance. So yeah, it really helps, doesn't it, Rebecca, to consider dependent origination in order to let go of that tendency we have to identify with experience. It's a bit like a fish in water. It's so all encompassing, this sense of self. It's hard for us to really appreciate it. So we have to meet it with these beautiful teachings. Dependent origination is particularly good, yes, at unpacking and, you could say, resetting our understanding of the way things are, of dismantling and dissolving that sense of self, selfhood, conceit. Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. And Marilyn rightly says, yeah, understanding anatta is the hardest of the three characteristics, just as I said. Yeah, quite so, Marilyn. And, oh, I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to have to be very, very brief, but I'll try and meet these questions if I can. Madeline, thank you, says, can you give us an example of how best to purify the heart? I would say along the lines of what I was touching on today, how best to purify the heart is to be really awake to, alert for, watching, attending, to see whenever suffering arises, whenever there's a feeling of disquiet, whenever there's a wanting or a not wanting in the heart, just to see whenever that happens, to be very alert to that and to come into the body and to feel out, how is it now? Indeed, body awareness is a very sure way to keep alert and watchful around suffering, because as soon as suffering arises, we can feel it in the body. For me personally, it will be when there's any kind of defilement arising, there'll be some agitation in the body, some clenching, some tension, some clenching of the jaw, tightening of the belly muscles, some disquiet, body and mind reflecting one another. So to purify the heart is to be aware and to be paying attention always, not to the outward flow of activities, but to what's happening right here. Thank you, Madeline. Sorry, it's a brief answer there. And one more question. Let's see if I can briefly meet this for you, Sud. Thank you, Sud. How can one measure whether one is progressing or not, given that we break and retake adhitanas in lay life? Yeah, thank you, Sud. How to assess, again, I would say this Heartwood Sutta, Majjhima 29, is really holding up a mirror for us to see whether we're progressing or not. We could go through these various aspects of our practice. How do I relate to my standing in the world, my position in the world, my status, my place in the scheme of things? How am I relating to that? How am I relating to virtue, to the precepts? How well am I keeping the precepts? How am I developing in virtue? How's my meditation practice going? Am I able to investigate, stay alert, stay awake in my meditation practice, not sinking into any kind of satisfaction or stillness for too long, rather to keep investigating the mind and the body. And how am I relating to my understanding of Dhamma, the spiritual attainments that I may have? How am I relating to my wisdom, my ability to be equanimous, my compassion? How do I relate to these things? Is to see whether there's any I in these things. And so to gauge your practice in these ways, and also, fundamentally, when we're on the path of practice, friends, we expect to see gradual, maybe very subtle but nevertheless present, emergence from reactivity, a lessening of the defilements, and a developing mindfulness, peacefulness, non-reactivity, compassion, loving kindness. We expect to see these kind of results, and if these things are not manifesting, then we can go to teachers, seek out wise friends, and discuss our practice and see where we might be able to help ourselves to develop further along the way. Again, a very short touching into that question. So, friends, time's up. I wish you all well in your practice. Please have a look at the Heartwood Suttas and consider them deeply. And also Majjhima 151, have a read. I won't be here next week, but I hope to be able to offer Dhamma in 2 weeks' time. Let's conclude by paying homage to our great teacher, the Buddha, with 3 heartfelt sadhus. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.